Um, Makerere University, the great university, specifically the School of Gender that we are partnering with. Policy makers, I know there are some here, and the future policy makers, members of the CSO. We have our friends from different civil society organizations, the students from Makerere and other universities. I know we have other students from other universities. Good afternoon. How are we? Good. My name is Titus Asimwe. I work with a Women's Pro Bono Initiative. Women's Pro Bono Initiative is a women rights organization. We offer legal aid to indigent women. We do public interest litigations. We do knowledge and research. We are here for such an activity because we believe in research and knowledge sharing. So it's a great pleasure to be here. The topic today is rather so personal in many ways. Many years I was here at Makerere Law School around year 3. I went to do my internship. Joining campus, I had business I was running, so I wanted to know how to keep my business well, so I decided to come and do law. Along the way, I got an opportunity to work, to go and intern with the Women's Pro Bono Initiative. That's where I get to interact with gender in this form. But me being there, most of the things that I get is asking me, you man, what are you doing in women's issues? I keep getting that everywhere. As a man, what are you? What's your role? Like, ebintu by'abakyalo bikolamu ki? When I went home and told my dad I'm starting to work with the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, he asked me, now, what are you going to work? What are you doing with women? So it's a question that keeps coming to me. So the question and the discussion we have today is rather not picked from anywhere. It's something that we have found in our work, even as we do litigation, as we do representation. We find these men, some perpetrators, some in need of help, some with a lot of knowledge gap. And now the question keeps coming back, what do we do with them? Do we engage them or do we leave them? So that's, I think, the gist of today's discussion. Are men welcome in advocacy for gender justice? Some will say, no, we don't need them. They have hurt us enough. Let them be wherever they are. If they continue hurting us, they will belong to to prison. But should that be the case? So I have a bias. That's why I'm not supposed to be on the panel, being a man and working in women's rights organization. So I believe so much that men should be involved in these discussions today. So, I believe that by the end of today, we shall have had a better understanding, and either to encourage them join or chase them away, very far away. So it's a great pleasure to be having this discussion today. With me, I moved with a team from WPI. I will invite Julia to stand up for recognition. Yes, we work with Julia. Tracy Nabali, who has led us through all this. And we came with our boss to make sure the discussion is moving on right. So put our hands together and for recognition, Miss Rose Wachikona. Thank you so much. So I will hand over the microphone to Dr. Daffin. I wish you a very happy dialogue. Please enjoy, learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the representative from Women's Pro Bono Initiative. They do some very good work. I hope maybe they will also tell us, because I know some students were asking me if there were opportunities for internship. Now that Women's Pro Bono, you're here. Some of the students were asking me if there are opportunities for internship, because we've been teaching them about gender and human rights, and they've become very passionate about it. So we hope maybe you will inform them before I leave here, so that they don't bombard me with questions. Thank you very much. I also wanted to say that in our midst, we have a visiting lecturer from University of Agder, Norway. He's called Associate Professor Eric Kimathi. I'm going to ask you to just come and give us a 2-minute something before we carry on. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In Swahili we say hamjambo. Hamjambo. My name is Eric Kimathi. I'm from Kenya, raised and grew up in a place called Meru, but currently I live in Norway, where I've lived for the last 10.5 years, and I work at the University of Agder in Kristiansand as Associate Professor of Global Development Studies, and I'm here courtesy of Erasmus Staff Exchange that exists between our faculty and various institutions, schools here at Makerere University. So I arrived on Saturday night and have been involved in activities in the School of Lifelong Learning, that's how you call it. And now from today, I'll be based at the Institute for Gender and Open Learning, where I'll be involved in mostly teaching and research work. And so it's a great pleasure to be here, to be invited to this gathering by Professor Ruth and our colleagues Daphne and Julius, of course, who I met last year in Kristiansand, a very wonderful gentleman. So yeah, I think I've exhausted my 2 minutes, and thank you so much for being here. I hope to get time to engage with all of you again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor. You know, I have a debate background, and you were usually given 10 minutes, and after 6 minutes, they started. So because of that, I am a stickler for time. With some of us in Uganda, we are still, it's a work in progress, for lack of a better word. So thank you for sticking to those 2 minutes. And so, without wasting time, it is 2:59, 1 minute to the time that we were promised. We're going to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Amon Mwine Ashaba, and I hope he's going to also give us a brief background of what he does before he presents his 15-minute keynote speech.
Titus, could you come back and project this? Good afternoon to you. Yes, welcome to today's event, an interesting conversation on the role of men in promoting gender justice in Uganda. When I shared the flyer for the meeting, somebody told me, hey, you're going to have a discussion with the Women Pro Bono Initiative. I said yes, and then said, hey, you're going to speak English. So we're going to speak English again. We're going to reflect, and when I asked them what they meant, because English is a foreign language, but also the concept of masculinities has proved to be foreign to most of us. So that's what they meant. So we are going to speak English around men and masculinities. I'm going to wait for Titus to finish sorting up what he's sorting up. We are supposed to have a projection here, and once it comes through, then we will take off. So just to let Daphne know that my 15 minutes start when the projection comes to effect. I'm called Amon Mwine. I do teach here at Makerere University in the Department of Gender Studies, dealing with one of the subjects that has proved to be that marginal, the question of masculinities in feminist scholarship. I also teach feminist activism and civil society. I'm glad to be part of this conversation where we are reflecting on the role of men in advancing gender justice in Uganda. So as a way of beginning our conversation, we want to note that there are historical junctures within the journey of activism for gender justice in Uganda. And one of those moments within this history rotates around the move, a deliberate move towards working with men to promote gender justice. And you meet the language in there, in this Turn to Men, a language that highlights aspects of partnership, joint decision-making, collaboration, and allyship. This is the language that you meet that alerts you to a move towards feminist engagement with masculinities. We do want to note that while male involvement as a strategy bears the potential to transform, to include and then transform gender relations, it is not without effect. It has its advantage, but there are other challenges that have evolved along the process. And so that is why we wanted to have a debate amongst ourselves as university students to reflect on this journey and look at what is it that we can work with, what is it that we need to cautiously be aware of and negotiate around. So in terms of our engagement, this is really the summary of what we want to look at. How the strategy has evolved from time to time. We want to look at the policy environment around this strategy. We want to look at the programmatic interventions that we have had. And then we will highlight, I will just flag a few tensions that have come around this strategy. And together we hope that we can craft a sustainable future for this strategy contributing to gender justice. Just to let you know that my PhD is entirely in masculinities. So that is to array any fears of what comes ahead of us. So, I don't know whether any one of you can spot what this building is. Would you tell what this is? It is? It is a church? Yes, there are many churches, but this is one of the churches, so it has got to be. So this is a symbol, a very symbolic space and a space of power. So we want to note that the question of men and masculinities in feminist conversation, as we have said, is gaining steady currency in masculinities, scholarship, but also within activism for gender equality, and again in everyday life. I do note that very recently, around 2020, narratives around the negation of the boy child in favor of the girl and the absence of fathers in homes and in places of worship was among the top concerns raised by the Right Reverend Dr. Stephen Kazimba Mugalu, the Anglican Archbishop of the Church of Uganda. And this is where we're beginning from. This was during his inaugural sermon after being consecrated, and in an emphatic question that to the seemingly male-dominated audience on that day, the Archbishop asked, "Where are the men?" In addition to this question, the Archbishop noted that while Uganda has appropriately supported the girl child, the boy child has been neglected. The narrative on the apparent neglect of the boy child, especially in gender equality activism, is not new in Uganda. However, it is the context in which this particular conversation emerges that becomes of public interest to me. I look at the statement from the most powerful religious leader and a custodian of certain norms around masculinity during his inaugural sermon at Namirembe Cathedral before a very huge audience that was male-dominated, asking a question of where the men are. And to me, it seemed like this question was not reflecting on the representation of the audience at that time, but rather the historical position that men have occupied within religious circles and within the family. Again, the narrative of What About the Boy Child points to the deep-seated tensions on the question of men and women within the women's movement and also in broadly the movement for gender justice. And so, this is where I chose to begin from. That this space represents the seat of power, but at the same time we see it as a space where which is raising complaints that we have seen as far as on the street in everyday life, but also amongst people that ought to take responsibility in that direction. I do note that, for instance, in 1891, this was the official seat of the Archbishop of Uganda. And within the same period, this same seat, Namirembe, received hundreds of petitions from women activists protesting inequalities of the time. There's a lot of history around that. And these protested inequalities included issues around inheritance, where women were excluded, issues of violence against women, political participation, and the question of citizenship. And I do note that many years later, it becomes a space that brings an interesting conversation on where are the men and why have the men and the boy children been neglected. So in some ways, that inaugural speech points to the kind of tensions that we are meeting, and perhaps each one of you has had that question of where is the boy child? And so this is the history I don't want to bother you a lot with, but I will speak to each of these as we go forward. From 1920 to 40s, there was the conversation, and from around 1980s and early 1990s, we meet another conversation in which the question of men comes up. Around 1990s going forward, 95 etc., we again look at interventions within gender and development approaches that aimed at dealing with relations between men and women, again looking at silences around men. 1994 and the international conferences from Beijing to others that followed, the question of men continued coming through, and then the millennial question of male involvement and the public calls on how do we work with men. But one of the interesting ones is the 1980s, which I wanted to bring to your attention. You probably could have met it in the literature that you read, but there was this popular narrative around balancing the scale. And this was the symbol that dominated 1980s and 90s programming in the Ministry of Women and Development, and later on Ministry of Gender and Development. So the idea behind this symbol, which appeared on many programming manuals, was that when you're dealing with inequality, which is a symbol of justice also, when you're dealing with inequality, you need to ensure that the weaker area or the side of this scale, which is on the lower side, is the scale that you pay attention to. And so I got an interesting story from Ministry of Gender during one of my studies on what that symbol meant. And they noted that in this balancing scale, training manual, one of the messages we had was that, you know, when the scale is tilted on one side, you have to put more weight on the other side, which is light, so that it can balance. We were saying when there is inequality, it means men are heavier. So the message that we took then was that after you have corrected your statistics, find the status, what is the position, where are the women, where are the men, boys and girls. The data gives you who is being affected. And then when you do that, most of the results that came in were showing girls were disadvantaged. So in programming, we started emphasizing strategies that focused on girls to bring equality in society. And this became the symbol that normalized what the notion of gender was and what programs we needed to focus on. What I did not share in here is his reflection, which he requested me to keep silent about. The idea that in these studies they found experiences of boys and men of disadvantage and of vulnerability, but this discourse could not allow paying attention to those because they were not significant statistically. And so the silence around experiences of men during this time did not necessarily mean that men universally were in positions of power and privilege. But the balancing of the scale ensures that they provide space to recognize and politicize women's position. At the same time, this kind of practice normalized, conceptualized gender in a binary ways, limiting knowledge about the other. So the attention was on women because of the numerical statistics that were corrected. And then the silence on the other was really loud and real. And then, again, in dealing with the question of masculinities and the women's movement, I met this treasure. I consider it as a treasure image. And these women activists whom you can identify at the moment were in 1990s protesting at the embassy of Italy here in Uganda. They are protesting against a case of violence against women, rape in Italy, where the judge had indicated that because the victim was putting on tight jeans, they cannot claim rape. And so these activists in Uganda protested in solidarity against justice systems that were blind to certain experiences of women. So what I wanted to project is not that actually. What I wanted to project is the position of men in conversations around violence against women. If you can look at this, you see who this person is and the posture that they cut. So this is the activism that we saw, genuinely focusing on the experiences of need, experiences of oppression amongst women and girls, but somehow men being distant from these conversations and at the margins, as if they had nothing to do with the kind of activism that was going on. And then 1994-95, as we head into Beijing conference, I met again within the work by Action for Development, articles asking, where are the men in the movement? How can we bring men on board now that we are moving towards gender and development? But at the same time, the experience of 1995 Fourth World Conference on Women was dominated by the question to the men who appeared in the conference, why have you come? Why are you here in the women's conference? The question that Titus shared here, what are you doing in the women's movement? I think all the male individuals who have found themselves into these spaces, either as teachers, as researchers, as activists, as whatever, have had to prove themselves and to explain why they are there. And so you can see the delegation that went from Uganda, that went to China, Beijing, in that conference, included men, and you can see the humor with which the cartoon carries. The Chinese wondering how Ugandan women have quickly transformed into men. And slowly, we look at tensions emerging on the place of men in gender conversations. You have people asking, where are the men? You have others saying, what are you doing here? And so, sort of, an irony in terms of where exactly should we position ourselves. At the same time, 1994, around reproductive health, we saw the International Conference on Population and Development, ICPD Action Plan, highlighting and making a call on the emphasis of the role of men in male responsibility and participation in reproductive health. And they highlight a number of things there which you can ably read through. Noting that changes in both men and women's knowledge, attitudes, and behavior are necessary conditions for achieving harmonious partnership of men and women. And they looked at how men play a key role in bringing about gender equality. In most societies, men exercise preponderant power in nearly every sphere of life, and they were wondering, how then do you proceed without them, given the kind of power they hold and the decisions they make, from the family to the entire society? And so they felt that we needed to deliberately reflect on male responsibility and participation in reproductive health, in family planning in particular. And so this is what they noted, that the male responsibility, especially that in the family, needed to be reflected on. And they noted that the family was envisaged and envisioned as the center of redefining men's role, responsibility, and participation. And one of the action points they noted was that governments across the world then needed to encourage, one, but also to enable men to take responsibility for their sexual and reproductive behavior, social and family life. And they went on to mention parenting and etc. And I wondered whether this has happened. How have we programmed ourselves as the university, as the civil society, to create capacity amongst men to take responsibility? And that's the enablement they were talking about. And again, within the movement, as we continued, certain voices started to come up reflecting on the significance of the place of men. And so this is one of the iconic figures in the women's movement who was at the heart of founding of gender studies, but also many women's rights organizations in Uganda, noting that I think the idea of bringing men came out of enthusiasm. You know, men are usually pointing out, whether casually or not, but you know you cannot do this work alone. You cannot change society without inclusion of men. And she noted that in the 90s, this became a key issue, that if you were doing advocacy, if you're going out training people and meeting and sensitizing, and you are not meaningfully aiming at bringing men on board, whether they are community leaders or husbands or whatever, people wondered, what kind of activism were you doing? And so these somehow remained isolated voices within the movement for gender justice. And then very recently, we had the millennial calls to involve men in gender equality. And these came from global actors, the World Bank, the IMF. And some of them went to the level of putting conditions on grants. That if you're not focusing on this, we're not availing resources to promote gender equality. Then we saw UN Women launching a campaign around he for she, around 2014. But we also looked at men's organizations forming and men's networks coming up, and selected women's rights organizations working with men as allies and change agents. And then many campaigns launched. Walk a Mile in Her Shoes and etc. You've seen all this. And then virtual spaces launched that look at masculinities. And when you look at all that, there's a policy environment around this, whether it is ICPD or the Fourth World Conference Beijing or the CSW, or at the national level, all these policies that have been listed, they have been here. And a few lessons have been learned, which I want to quickly flag as I live in obedience to the moderator. But when you look through all that, you see a sense of optimism for gender equality. And some scholars here in Uganda have characterized this as a period of strategic maneuver. Srivet Amari talks about how women in parliament identified male champions to augment women's voice. And she calls that strategic engagement. We've talked about negotiating patriarchy. You are 5 women and 100 men. If we were to vote, you would lose. So how do you engage in a way that you create awareness, you build alliance, and you tap into that kind of power, numerical power? And then some of these, strategies have been used as a tool to achieve equity reforms. And you have cases around domestic violence, FGM, and debates around sexual offences bill and the place of men. But you have also had allyship around these activists in ACFOD, in ONET, and in WOPA. You've heard about possibilities. Now, we can ably stand in Makerere University and teach men and masculinities within feminist scholarship. So there are possibilities that we have registered. But at the same time, there are concerns that have emerged. This was a campaign in COVID-19. It was running on TV, and I screenshot that. It was talking about using men to address gender equality. I don't know whether you know using people and what it means. And somebody was wondering. So this is a campaign launched by UN system, and this is a feminist in the women's movement asking, I need help. I am really struggling with these campaigns that have become huge programs. And then she lists them. He for she, men engage, men at work for gender equality, positive masculinity. And then she warns that patriarchy has a way of evolving itself. And you need to watch the space. We had trending comments recently on men in the kitchen, and we thought this was a form of backlash. You remember prominent people who said, even if me and my wife were coming from work, she doesn't have the audacity to ask me to fix a meal in the kitchen. Did you hear that? And we started to think that some of these men-engaged spaces can actually nurture possibilities of backlash. And then this picture here, you have known hospitals that use the strategy, encouraging, expecting mothers to come with their husbands. And then you have a medical person addressing, expecting mothers. And then the men are under the tree after packing their borders, discussing the match between Arsenal and Real Madrid. So what are we talking about? Engaging men for what? So these are concerns that are emerging within this strategy. What assumptions do men involvement strategies come with? What discourses do we appropriate? And to what effect? If you say, what was it? Using men to achieve women's empowerment. What exactly are you talking about? The whole idea of using, but also the whole idea of assuming that empowerment is bestowed. Men at work, have you not seen this? Has it not been part of the sexist world that we have confronted as gender studies? So when you appropriate this and say men at work for gender equality, what kind of troubled history are you bringing into this strategy, and to what effect? So how much space have we interrogated these to ensure that a strategy that has come to critique male power does not reproduce the kind of male domination that we are questioning? The last concerns, when we say we want to involve men, which men are we talking about? How do we engage them? And what form of change do we want to see? Are these the questions that we raise? Or we are basically talking about men involvement? And Sylvia Tamari talked about strategic maneuver as a short-term measure. But when it becomes a long-term strategy, what impact does it have? Silencing women's voice? Do we ever look at that? And you know, when we're discussing sexual offences bill, the mover of the bill told us that, you know what, we've worked with male as champions, but you beg, you kneel, you roll down on the ground. It is as if you're begging your husband. And we were wondering, okay, have we reflected on these strategies in terms of what they can achieve, but also what difficult situations they can reproduce and how to engage with that? And finally, have we observed the wide gap between theory, the academia, and practice? I can bet this is the first time for Women Pro Bono Initiative to extend their hand to the academia. How many times have we had those converging spaces where the civil society speaks to the academia and the academic work speaks to the world of advocacy? And again, this renowned scholar here warns that theory, which is usually dismissed in the civil society as abstract things, is about understanding the what, the why, and the how. Questions about women's oppression and about women's power. And when feminist theory does not speak to gender activism, and when the latter does not speak to the former, then the unfortunate result is that you have half-baked and truncated feminism. So you tend to hear advocacy with concepts around toxic masculinities, positive masculinities. They sound trendy, but have we interrogated what these concepts mean and in what context we need to use them? And so these are some of the concerns that we would like to raise and say, in what context would the strategy of male involvement be effective in promoting gender justice? Over to you, our moderator and the team of proponents.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amon Mwinye, for setting the stage and asking so many important questions. What are you doing here as men? Where are the men? Sometimes women have called that whataboutism. You go and you're discussing a very important point, and the only male gentleman in the room puts up his hand and says, where are the men? No? How do we improve gender relations? Why has there been a lot of attention on women? Will men take over women's gains once and if they are made part of this discussion? Why were the men excluded in the first place? How do you involve the men without entrenching the patriarchy that you're challenging and the dominant power relations that you're challenging? What strategies do we use? Where is theory and where is practice? Do they respect each other? Are they working with each other? I was talking about the fact that in the university we seem to be this excluded entity working almost in an ivory tower, and then we also have civil society. Where are those opportunities for engaging? Civil society tells academia, your things are too theoretical. You will not find them on the ground. Academia tells civil society, but how will you work without the theory? Which knowledge are you presenting when you go into the field? How do we match those? Terminologies that we are throwing around: hegemonic masculinity, toxic masculinity, militarized masculinity. There is even now one that I had today, which is something to do with vulnerable masculinities. So all these terminologies that are peripherized masculinities. So these are some of the things I want to hear from our proponents and opponents. As I had said earlier, we have 4 proponents and opponents, and each one is going to take 10 minutes. At the end of each one's statement, we'll have one burning question, which we are calling a point of information from the audience before we go to the next speaker. Just one. We have Jimmy Ongom on the part of the proponents. Again, put your hand up so that we see where you are. We have Sharifa Nabawesi, a student of Masters of Arts in Human Rights. Thank you. We have Jordan Tumwesije. We were gossiping about you and your timekeeping. Yes, we don't gossip, we tell you what we are talking about. Yes, you're welcome, Jordan Tumwesije, and we are happy to have you. And then Daniela Mushekazi. Are we still waiting for Daniela or someone? I see here Daniela Kajina. I don't know if that's changed. Is Mushekazi still joining us? Yeah. She will be early for the next engagement. Okay, so we're going to start off our debate. We are officially opening the debate now, and we're going to start off our debate with Jimmy Ongom proposing this topic today. Do men have a role to play in advancing gender justice, and what role is that exactly? Okay, so the proponents have discussed among themselves and they've prepared their arguments, and they thought that in order to have a powerful debate, they would like Jordan Tumwesije to start us off today. on the opponent side, and then after that, we'll have Sharifa on the opponent side. 10 minutes, Jordan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My brother bullied me into starting first because he felt I am older than he is. And because of ageism, he decreed and declared that it would be better that I propose first. So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jordan, Jordan Tumwesije. And I must say that it's indeed a great honor to be here this afternoon. It's very nice to have these sobering conversations, considering there are people, there's a section of men who believe that the best way to express opinion is by shouting and making it seem like when you speak calmly, then you're less of a man. But hopefully from the discussion we'll have today, we'll remove any doubt as to as to sex. So I must say that it's a great pleasure to return to Makerere. I was here in between 2014 and 2018, where I had the rare honor of being president of the Makerere Law Society. And it feels good to return after all these years. And this afternoon, we'll basically be talking about the role of men in advocating or in advancing gender justice. And in having this discussion, I feel it is pertinent to talk about also the other reason why I am here. So I'm a lawyer, but I also run a mentorship program called the Ngumokio Mentorship Program, which targets young men aged between 20 and 35 years of age. And we basically, what we do at Ngumokio is that we provide mentorship to these men across their personal and professional lives. And so therefore this afternoon I'll be sharing from my experiences, first of all as a man, but also from the joint experiences of the men that I've interacted with under the Ngumokio mentorship program. First and foremost, I think it's important for us to understand what gender justice is. Gender justice is essentially equality and equity of the sexes. And from that very foundation, it's important to then understand that when extremities are taken in advancing gender justice, these extreme approaches, and I'll call them, Doctor referred to militant masculinity, for instance, and its polar opposite, militant feminism. It is my argument this afternoon that those extremes will not push us to a point of achieving gender justice. From that very point, I must state that indeed gender injustice does affect men as well. At the very foundation, it's important to remember that the systems, the patriarchy and capitalism, when they combine these two systems, they create a very powerful yet potent combination which actually exacerbates or worsens gender inequality. In that regard, therefore, I will hear, and indeed I know it will be the case of the opposing team, that men have indeed established these systems and they've curated these systems, and they're actually right. But ladies and gentlemen, the question to ask this afternoon therefore is, if a man were to build a house and this house were to collapse upon that man, should we give up on that man and say, after all, you constructed that house and therefore you deserve to be relegated to the effects of the house crashing on you? It is my assertion this afternoon that that is a very counterproductive route to take, and that rather we need to sit down with this man and try to understand, why is it that you built this house? The reason was subjugation, but the subjugation has actually turned against that man. This is a conundrum that I will call the masculine law of unintended consequences. That when men, our forefathers crafted these systems, when they created the patriarchy, when they fronted capitalism as the best mode of production, what they did was they did not foresee that they would become the very same prisoners in the prison that they had constructed for women. So therefore, the question to ask this afternoon is, should we relegate the men who had no duty in building those systems? Should we forget about those men and say, enough is enough? After all, you constructed this system, and therefore, there is no use of you? Or should we instead say that because you constructed this system and you have seen the error of your ways, how can we sit down with you and actually work together towards gender justice? Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's also the case of the proposers this afternoon that to achieve gender justice, you cannot concentrate on one gender and leave out the other. Because when you look at the foundation that I started with, talking about gender justice being the equality and equity of sexes, it therefore means we cannot forget the men who are actually crying and are saying that they've been forgotten. Of course, we concede as the affirmative team this afternoon that indeed men, as I've said, have contributed to this system, but it is also our case that these men can actually be helped out of this system to deal with the consequences of this system. While talking about how gender injustice affects men, I remember that in around 2016, when the maternal mortality rate of this country still stood at 336 deaths per 100,000 live births, there was a civil society organization that did the computation and discovered that the 336 deaths per 100,000 live births actually did translate to 16 women dying every single day due to childbirth. Now, because of that, this civil society organization went ahead and pushed a campaign, the Petition 16 campaign, where they were basically saying that, look, 16 women are dying every single day. What that campaign forgot to add was that these 16 women had brothers, had husbands, had uncles, had nephews who were adversely affected by these statistics as well. So therefore, in advocating, in advancing for gender justice, in men coming out to say that we need to have better maternal services for our women, it also extends to them because it actually does affect them. Let us bring the example closer to home, because I hear some people may say that example is a bit far-fetched. Dr. Amon Ashabamwine here conducted a study in 2022, which among the key findings they discovered, and that's where we have the examples of the shades of masculinity, that there were some men in this country who were adversely affected by historical factors, among other things, the effect of the patriarchy, for instance, things to do with wars in northern Uganda. And this study went ahead and actually showed that these men had actually given up on themselves, and they had actually descended into drug abuse and alcoholism. Dr. Amon later on called these men Panado men, that whenever they would fall sick, these people would just keep taking more drugs and taking painkillers, because again, as a man, you're not supposed to be seen to express pain, because as a man, you're not supposed to be seen to fall sick. So what this study also showed is that men are actually also victims of this system. Are we clear? Are we clear on that? And that if they are victims of these systems, we need to do much more to ensure that these men are recovering from the effects of that system. I think for me, in recovering from the effects of this system, first of all, it's important for men, first of all, to understand that, to acknowledge our privilege as the first step. In acknowledging our privilege, it will open us up to the possibility of also exploring the ways in which we've also been affected by the patriarchy and capitalism. And furthermore, in doing that, we will be able to open ourselves up to things that are previously thought to be very alien to men, things like empathy, which are very key in the discussion on gender justice this afternoon. Healing is a funny thing. Healing actually does unblock the heart chakra. How many of us know something called chakras? This body of ours has different pressure points, and one of the pressure points is called the heart chakra. When men find healing, and that's why I started from the foundation of saying that we need to have a conversation about how broken masculinity is with a view to healing masculinity, which in essence also leads to gender justice at the end of the day. If we achieve healing, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that that will be a very crucial step towards achieving gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also important, and as I conclude, that in this discussion, men should not define masculinity merely as anti-femininity. Masculinity cannot and should not be restricted to anti-femininity. Instead, masculinity can be construed as complementing femininity. In this, ladies and gentlemen, that is how we will be able to achieve gender equality at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I would like to remind us of the words of the 44th President of the United States of America, Barack Hussein Obama, who remarked and said that it does not matter whether you're driving a hybrid or an SUV, but as long as you're heading for a cliff, it's very, very important to change course. Ladies and gentlemen, the approaches that have been adapted for gender equality are okay and they are good. But for us to achieve meaningful gains, it is very important to actually involve men at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've made the case for why men are important in this discourse, and I hope that this steers a very good discussion from the rest of my colleagues on why men actually need to be to take center stage in this discussion. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Men as uncles, nephews, husbands. How the tables have turned. When a man does something, they say, would you do this to your sister? Would you do this to your mother? So I like to hear these tables turning. And then I like to hear things like men in touch with their chakra and in their emotions, broken masculinity. Anyone with a burning point of information, point of clarity, a very quick question to our presenter. As you're thinking about those questions, we're going to have the proposing side come and present their point. And the proposing side is headed by Sharifa Nabawesi, a student from the Masters of Arts in Human Rights. The floor is yours, Sharifa.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am privileged to be here and have this amazing debate with all of you on the topic of advancing. Can you hear me? I doubt. Better that way, I think. Advancing gender justice, but of course having men included in there. I'll start my discussion, of course, with introducing myself. My name is Nabawesi Sharifa, and I'm a master's student of Arts and Human Rights here at Makerere University. But I'm also an assessment and intake officer at Refugee Law Project, School of Law of Makerere University. You're all welcome. And my opponent here. And before I start my discussion, I wanted us to think about something. Today I was watching the news and what is happening today, interestingly, in Somalia. Because I work with refugees, I'm so much interested in finding out what happens around their lives, but also in the countries they come from. And in Somalia today, there is a protest against one of the cases that has to do with, should I call her a girl bride, 6-year-old that was married off to this rich gentleman, and he decided to hide her for years, where they have been looking for her, including all the officials interested in the case, but they go to find out that this man actually has been hiding this 6-year-old, hiding her and using her as a wife. So as we think about that, still discussing gender justice here, I don't think I need to go back into the definitions as the gentleman has already taken you through. I think I'll just run straight to the points. Having men into the discussion of gender justice is not bad. And of course, to bring us to this entire thing is women actually don't live in isolation of men. That is so true. But also, no one wants to be on top of the other. Having very many women movements coming in, programs and projects to see that we have equality and equity does not mean that women probably want to be on the top of it, want to sit on men, as someone would say, or maybe take all the credit and start acting as men. You know, it's not what we are looking at. But it's basically having equal opportunities, being seen as human beings as well and understood in the community that we live in and work in. You know, things are different when it comes to discussing them here in the debates, having conferences and dialogues talking about them, but what actually happens back in the communities and the societies is really different. Diving into my points, I think for all the years we've been having the discussion of gender justice, it has been women-led organizations leading this. Most of the time, like today we have convened in here who has invited us, Women's Pro Bono Initiative. Okay, it would have been Men's Pro Bono Initiative, maybe, but also looking at the many cases that have been litigated, who has been at the forefront. We've had the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers, FIDA, and we've read of very many cases that they have taken to public litigation, for example, seeing that women get justice. They have done a lot of community work in the communities, those women that cannot come here to see that at least there is a bit of gender equality. We get to challenge these gender norms, the negative patriarchy, you know, that is in the societies. I have not seen a men-led organization come in and do that. I'm sorry, if I'm wrong, please educate me. And I think in 2018 in Uganda here, we had the Kampala women's protest. And these women came up to protest against the women killings that were happening all around Uganda. We've had those very things in Kampala here, in Masaka, and very many areas of Uganda. I didn't see men marching with them, did you? If I'm wrong, please, I stand to be corrected. Again, to another point, we are having a lot of structure and institutional barriers, you know, limited male commitment to gender justice. While Uganda has very many policies promoting gender justice, male leaders have been slow or a bit reluctant in implementing meaningful reforms. For example, it actually took us years to have a marriage bill. We had a marriage and divorce bill that was actually shelved by the parliament for long, and it is still recent, last year, that we have a marriage bill in Uganda of 2024. But for how many years has this country been in existence? I mean, still after colonialism, why didn't we have a marriage bill, you know? And this marriage bill that we have right now is talks of equal property rights, yes, and it speaks that the bill ensures that spouses have equal rights to matrimonial property, recognizing financial and also non-financial contributions, for example, domestic work and caretaking work. But the question is, how many women have been kicked out of those homes, out of those houses, even after they were there from the actual planning to construction, taking care of these houses, birthing children in there? The question is just to answer. But also, this very bill criminalizes child marriages, but also how many child marriages do we still, you know, we see them happening every single day in our communities. And who are the people that are taken as young brides? Unfortunately, it's the girls. So having men that are still doing that, coming in to say that they should be part of the journey to gender justice, really raises questions. And my third point is that it's very difficult to perpetuate patriarchy when we are having actually the actual people holding on to this thing, you know, for long. Men are the gatekeepers of this thing, of gender oppression, all of it. Like many men in Uganda continue to uphold and benefit from patriarchy norms, making their role in advancing gender justice really questionable. For example, we have the land ownership, land ownership discrimination, yes. We have a Succession Act. I'm sorry, someone would remind me the year. We have the Succession Act in Uganda, but although even the Constitution of Uganda guarantees that women's right to own property, it's only 7% till date of women that actually legally own land in Uganda. Recently, there was a bank that came out to help women that own small-scale businesses, probably to advance themselves, be able to see themselves better, have their businesses grow. And this bank was asking for land titles as security. And then the women that were owning businesses were like, how many women are running small businesses are actually owning land and have land titles? Have you actually come to help women? Or you want them to bring their husband's land title so that at the end of the day, the husbands take the money? I will not leave without giving you this example that one of my doctors in class mentioned that with the PDM, this recent thing of, how is it called? Yes, the Parish Development Model. In Community X, this chairperson was a man, and for women to be able to obtain the money to better themselves, they had to get a letter or a signature from him. And for every woman that would go there to talk to him, you're like, you have to give me something in exchange for the signature. And when I mean something is that you have to bring your body forth so that at least I can give you a signature and you can be able to obtain this money. And at the end of the day, if you agree to that, you take the money. And still the women were mentioning that even after going through all those hurdles, the men would go ahead and say, if at all you have gotten 2 million, bring that money, I can be able to budget for it. So you see, I mean, all that really poses questions is that, do we really need men in this run? Or we can be able to do it on our own? Anyway, another point is that we are having symbolic and substantive involvement, male allyship. Many men claim to support gender justice, but fail to take substantive action, challenging the actual male privilege. I think we shall call it tokenism. Maybe that suits it better. Men in leadership versus the men in action. When we hear these conversations of, yes, men talk about gender equality, I think it so much comes in the period where men are campaigning, politicians are campaigning. You'll hear these conversations come, I think this year, probably heading into next year. But most of the time, these are just political talks. What really happens on ground? Have you had anything change so far? Good thing you're answering me. I love that. And then we also have limitations of legal and policy frameworks for gender justice. While Uganda has very many gender justice policies, male resistance and loopholes prevent full implementation. Like we have the Land Act of 1998 that guarantees women's land rights, but still we are having the patriarchal cultural norms that actually prevent women from owning or inheriting land. Think about it in the local community where you come from. How many widows are allowed to inherit their husband's land and houses when the husband's passed on? How many of them? And I actually think we have, I think it's the Succession Act, I beg to be corrected, that mentions that the widows, the women, are allowed to inherit their husband's houses, but for as long as this woman remarries, they have to move out of that house, go out, and probably have property of this other husband that comes in. But the same act does not say anything when it comes to widowers. See the imbalance, see the injustice. Anyway, in conclusion, I think male involvement in gender justice is important, yes, but it really remains insufficient to drive transformative change. While some men support gender equality in principle, the actions sometimes lack depth and consistency. I think they actually need to, the consistency that is needed to dismantle the patriarchal structures. Despite the presence of the progressive laws that we have in Ugandan policies, male participation in advancing gender justice has largely been symbolic, and patriarchal assistance, selective engagement, the allyship, and real lack of accountability continue to limit meaningful contributions from men. And therefore, I think the real momentum for change has probably been driven by women most of the time through the women-led organizations which have consistently challenged the systems of inequality where male allies have actually fallen short. I beg to submit. Thank you for all coming here and listening to me.
Thank you, Sharifa. She has posed some heavy questions for our proponent team, Jordan Tumwesije and Jimmy. I hope you're getting ready to answer them. How do we work with people who are essentially working against us? We have a marriage law where the members of parliament, the male members, walked out in protest and said, this law you're proposing to us, what is this? Huh? And essentially people are saying we are talking about property rights, we are talking about the right to consent to sex in marriage. And the men were saying, if I married you, you're my property. At which day or on which day do you come and start telling me otherwise? So the question that has been asked to the proponent team, how do we work with people who we feel are essentially working against us? And do these people want to let go of that power? Where have you ever heard of anyone wanting to relinquish their power, leave their privileged position? Do they really want to give up that kind of power? Where are the men's organizations working on gender justice? Where is Men's Pro Bono Initiative, to quote Sharifa? And then, why are we paying lip service if we are really committed to fighting for gender justice? Why is it something which has a lot to do with men in leadership rather than men in action? Are these men actually using gender as another way of actually taking over and leading this movement to their advantage, to their career advantage, rather than for the cause for which they stand for? These are very hot questions, which I hope Jimmy Ongom is going to try and start addressing. Jimmy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, the organizers of today's debate. I personally never wanted to call it a debate because it will look like it's a fight between men and women. Secondly, the organizers choose to put the men versus the young ladies, which in my head, I was thinking, is it a discussion or we are going to have a wrestling event? I almost feared to come because I would not want to touch a young woman in any way. Well, this discussion for today takes me way back when I was in second year. I decided to major in gender. And the first question I was asked from University Hall where I reside, what do you want to know about women? How to breastfeed? And you know how such questions can be very much embarrassing. Very embarrassing. I was thinking of changing. Should I go and do psychology? Oh, I do criminology. But because I have interest to play a role in understanding, also to make other young gentlemen outside know that as men, we have a role. Not only a role, actually we have several key roles to play to ensure gender justice in Uganda. Well, before I came in, the speaker before asked so many questions. How do we work with people who have essentially worked against us? In many cases, we don't understand, like my brother had already put it. Some of these things are so much historical. And as time changes, our perspectives about women must also change. And that is why I find it so important that as young men, we must collaborate with the women so that we find that equality, justice is actually attained. Why? Because as men, we have, in the first place, the concept of intersectionality. It is not only men that results to gender inequality, unless I am wrong. Is it only men that are making women look vulnerable? We have so many factors that play roles. One, you may be subjected to inequality just because of your color. We have seen very many young Africans who travel from Africa to go to Europe to look for jobs, but they are discriminated. Why? Because of the color of their skin. When we look at religion, where today many women, do you realize that when you go to a church, the highest number of church members are women? But who are the top leaders in the church? So do you mean it is only men. We also have other factors. You come to educational institutions. Who are the top? When we look at the positions, the most important positions are being occupied by men. If a woman tries to go ahead there, she is fought. That means we need to change our thoughts in collaboration with what is happening today. Now, what are we supposed to do as men in ensuring that gender justice is attained? One, we look at power. Very many people fear to talk about power. And even if we want to put women at the forefront of holding powers, they may be very much scared. So now we need to involve men, so that they can use the power in a way that it can advance women's legal and other rights. Now, so when we are talking about gender equality, so we must also know that men play a key role in bringing about gender equality, since in many societies today, we look at men as key holders of important positions relating to power. If we look at, for example, the Buganda kingdom, for example, the supreme person in this ladder of leadership is mainly a man. And therefore, engaging him in trying to bring out gender equality will actually advance our fights against gender inequality. So we need to engage them, because it is the man who decides on the number of members. For example, if I am married, it is me to decide on the number of children that I want to have. Therefore, when I am engaged as a man and putting forward all these other challenges, as a man, I would actually understand the position of this woman. That means our man is so much important in understanding gender, in advancing gender justice. Now, in Uganda, for example, we have a diverse culture. You agree? And these cultures and their practices are very much different. Today's morning, I was watching a movie called Molade. So Molade is specifically looking at FGM, which is also practiced in Uganda. So FGM, I'm here talking about female genital mutilation or female genital cutting. So we have societies that in Uganda here that are so much into the practice of FGM. Why? It is because of the culture that is in Uganda. Now, a case in point is Sabine. In Uganda in 2010, they put forward a law against female genital mutilation called the FGM Act of 2010. But do you realize that because men were not engaged in making this law, they look at these women as not clean, as not purified. So for you as a woman to be purified, women cross to Kenya to go and experience the cutting. You can see the pains that women go through. That means if we want to bring about all these cultures to an end, we need to engage the men. Because without the men, nothing much will be forward. A famous quote from the movie that I was watching, it said that it takes more than a pair of balls to be a man. That means as men, we must in any way be engaged. Maybe many did not understand. I can repeat. The statement was, it takes more than a pair of balls to be a man. Yeah? So that means you cannot be a man just because you have the pair of balls. You have roles to play. Okay? In changing a lot of things that happen within our societies. So I put it upon us as we dissect on the roles of men in advancing gender justice. We must never forget that as men, we are also not at threat that women are taking our positions. There must be collaboration, because without collaboration, we might not achieve what we intend to achieve. So, I would conclude by saying, my sister talked about ownership of resources. In this country, we all know that resources that are available are mainly owned by men. But as we continue to engage men and women in advancing gender justice, to ensure that women also have a portion of what they call theirs, we cannot do this without involving the men. So these resources must, at any one point, be discussed basing on what men and women feel like it is right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I grew up from a conflict setting, and it is not by mistake that the conflict happened as I was growing. But the vulnerability that we are talking about, it is not basically on the side of women alone. My brother also talked about vulnerable masculinity. As men, we must also not be silent about the challenges that we face, because we also have a lot of other challenges that is way beyond, and the world doesn't want to talk about it. When we look at street kids, as we are empowering women, where are the men? Because these are the same men that you as an empowered woman, you're going to meet 20 years from today. So, when we are advancing women and gender equality, we must collaborate, like I said before, so that we can have a community that coexists. So, as we are sitting here, we are the hope that we must play roles in our different capacities to engage men and women so that gender justice can be achieved in Uganda. So, I wish to end here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ongom. It was not deliberate to put the men as proponents and the women, young women, which I don't know how you know that they are young. It was not deliberate. So as the opponent, I think she finally joined us. I hope she's here. Daniela Mushikazi. I will leave it there. So as you get ready to come, there's some questions that Ongom has posed that I hope you will touch on. Is it only men who are perpetrators of gender inequality and other forms of inequality? How do we talk about gender while excluding a vital part of that gender? Is that gender talk really a comprehensive one? Then we had a question from the audience, still to Sharifa. And the question was saying, engaging men solely as tools to advance women's rights without recognizing their struggles, vulnerabilities, and identities is not only unsustainable, but it is unjust. And Ongoma has touched on that when he said, why are we ignoring the vulnerabilities of men? Men who go to war, PTSD as a result of the war, the street children right now, the border men right now. Do you know that there is a wing that is dedicated to border men as we speak for the accidents in the ICU? So what of the vulnerabilities that men face? Why have we dehumanized men and overhumanized women? I hope you can start somewhere there.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very, very privileged and glad to be here. First of all, my sincere apologies for my tardiness. I was on the way here, and then I received a phone call that required me to turn back, and therefore I was late. So Dr. Agawa, please receive my sincerest apologies. I don't usually behave this way. But I was following online. I followed the keynote address. I also followed Jordan's very limited speech, but I'll address it later. And also, of course, as the last opponent, I will first and foremost rebut the proponent's case, build on Sharifa's case, make recommendations for our side, and then conclude there. Thank you very much. So I'll start now. I would like to say that, first of all, I identify very strongly as a feminist. I cannot say that I am a perfect feminist or that I have entirely learned all the theory, but I am a willing and learning feminist. So to begin there, I'd also like to say that I am a very, very strong opponent to the fact that men need to be engaged in the journey for gender justice. And I'll begin by addressing a few points that Jordan made. First of all, Jordan made the misguided assumption that we live in a benevolent society where all men are willing participants and listeners to the issues of women. And then he went ahead and said men should be brought to the table to be discussed with, and men also realize that this house of patriarchy that they built has collapsed on them, and they also recognize that there are negative effects to them. I'd like to strongly oppose that, because very many men, even for the privileges, even though there are few that patriarchy affords them, they are very unwilling, first of all, to give up the little power, the little privilege, and the access that it gives them, even though it means that that would require, or that would mean that both men and women move forward. So to begin with, men have a very big role in putting up, building, and sustaining patriarchy. I'd just like to give you a few statistics to begin with. Of course, also women are the biggest victims of gender inequality and any other excesses that come out of patriarchy. To begin with, women are the biggest victims of physical, domestic violence, sexual-related offenses. Women are the biggest victims of any limitations in sexual reproductive health rights and access. Women are the ones who are being locked out of decision-making rooms. Women are being denied access to voting rights, finance, the right to work, the right to live in dignity and freedom. And my case is that the work of gender justice should focus solely on empowering women and giving women autonomy and equal access as men do. It is not women's business whether men are engaged. It is not women's business whether men are brought to the table. And also just to say that I agree that men have very many lived experiences that we are not aware of. And Jordan, like he said, runs a mentorship program. And I hope that very many men can begin very many initiatives like that to focus on the issues and the lived experiences of men, because as women, they are unique to you, we are not aware of them, and therefore you should have the conversations in your mentorship group, you should have the conversations to uplift other men and to support them for all the issues that they face. But also secondly, on the issue of intersectionality, where Ongom stated that there are very many other modes of oppression that men face, including racism, discrimination on tribal grounds, men suffer in conflict. I'd like to let you know all that in every situation, a poor man will oppress a poor woman. A man in conflict will oppress another woman in conflict. I'd like to give you an example. In DRC, in the last clashes that were there, they released male prisoners. There was an escape from a prison for war prisoners, right? And instead, in a conflict situation, instead of running away to freedom, those men went and attacked a women's section and carried out gang rapes. In the middle of conflict, men still find the time to oppress women. So if you think that the work of gender justice is urgent to them, if you think that the work of gender justice is urgent to men, you have another thing coming. Men just want to pay lip service to this agenda, and for women, you need to realize that this is a fight for your life. There is no negotiation, there is no time to pander, there's no time for soft language of, please, please give us the rights. There's no person who's going to give you rights when they're benefiting from power. The keynote speaker even stated it. He said it said that when they were engaging male parliamentarians on a certain law and carrying out advocacy, they had to beg and kneel. In this marriage law, actually, I think it hasn't yet been passed. That law has been discussed in Parliament since 1953. There have been commissions of inquiry, there have been changes in government, there have been conflict in Uganda, but all the governments that were oppressive, Obote, Idi Amin, its government, the golden thread was that this is not an important enough issue. We'd rather oppress the rest of the country, political changes are going to happen, but you need to realize that to men, women's issues are not urgent. And they hold the power, they hold the privilege, they have access, and therefore the focus, women should stop wasting resources, their breath, their time, trying to pander to men and soften the language, right? There's a lot of work to be done for us to gain our autonomy in every way. So this, the gender injustice that we suffer, I have stated that it disproportionately affects women, it disproportionately excludes women to the advantage of men. So when people say male engagement, I wonder male engagement to the advantage of who? Because it's not benefiting women. Patriarchy is a system of like social, economic, political views that oppress women. This again has been put in place and is upheld, whether consciously or not, whether men are willing or they are not, they are just idle bystanders to it. This fight is for women, and if you do not realize that it is urgent for you and not urgent for them, then we are going to make very, very many losses. So I hope I have answered those. Then the second thing that I'd like to say is just to assert 3 points. I think the work of gender justice for women, it should be focused. If men have issues that they would like to address, they should organize around those. They should mobilize around them. They should come up with theories and study. Women have been fighting and writing and organizing and marching for millennia, and we are still very far from where we want to be. If men also want to fight the injustices that they face, which we agree that there are many, they can organize around those issues. So first and foremost, the work of gender justice is to assert women's autonomy, and there is nothing else. There is nothing else that is as important and as urgent as that. The second, and I think the most important, is that male engagement wastes an opportunity. While engaging men, we could be using this time to strengthen our systems, to strengthen our institutions. Like Ongom was saying that men they occupy cultural, religious, political power, and therefore if we want women to get power, we need to engage them so that they can give us the power. In which, name one story where somebody has willingly handed over power or a situation where they benefit. You have to take it from them. And you have to assert your autonomy. There is no other two ways about it. And therefore, just to give you an example, for example, the slave trade, and just to build on my point of institutional reforms, there have to be institutions that are strong enough to even overcome men's resistance to women's autonomy, such that even the men who are reluctant, the brothers and the fathers who are not willing to give their sisters and wives property, the brothers and the fathers who want to marry off their girls and not take them to school, there have to be systems, there have to be institutions, there have to be legal, policy, and other framework protections for women, and that's the way we are going to get changes to happen. FGM was illegalized because a law was passed, and now, for it to be enforced, police and other institutions have to be brought into play to ensure that women do not suffer from this injustice. And also to sensitize those women and allow them to free themselves from that cultural shame. Yes? So even in the age of slavery, the government did not go up to slave owners and say, please give us these slaves. They passed a law, they banned the slavery. They had some other remedies in place, but there had to be a hard stop on it. So our benefit and our goals and our gains are going to be in institutional reform. And thirdly, for the men that resist, there has to be a system of accountability. And again, this goes back to institutional reform and institutional, I mean across the board, culturally, religiously, legally, politically, there has to be institutional reform, and women have to really, really dig in and do the work of organizing and let go of the whole dream and the fantasy of engaging men. Because engaging men just reinforces patriarchal standards. If men want to be allies to the feminist movement, the only thing that they can do is get out of women's way. That's the only contribution that men can make to feminism. They just get out of women's way and stop interrupting and stop asking, what about the men? You have a space to organize. Nobody has bad civil society organizations that fight for the injustices of men. Nobody has stopped men from accessing schools. Nobody has stopped men from accessing financing. Nobody has stopped men from accessing equal opportunity and treatment in their marriages and in their partners. We really, really, really need to stop this business. So we need to center and prioritize women's autonomy, because male engagement distracts from our ultimate goal, which is institutional reform, which is women's autonomy, and which is accountability of men that resist this change. Because as it stands now, men do not have any limits to what they can achieve. Of course, that's a very absolute statement. And of course, you can say men in conflict settings, men in poor countries, men in countries where there isn't very good infrastructure development. But in each and every of those situations I have told you, even in a conflict situation, a man will still find time to rape a woman. A man will still find time to exclude a woman in some sort of protection. So in every situation, a poor man will oppress, a black man will oppress a black woman. So even though the black man is facing racism from the white people, intersectionality again comes in. Women are facing 2 layers of oppression. So there are, and this is not a competition, this is not an oppression Olympics, it just is the fact. In a system where there is patriarchy, women are always a level lower. So if you think you're going to engage men, if you think you're going to convince men to come on board, and if you think you're going to convince men to agree with you and fight for your rights the way you would, nobody is going to fight for your life like you. The women who are being raped, the women who are being beaten, the women who are being denied justice, they deserve women activists who focus on those particular issues that only they face. I cannot believe that he came and said that when we were fighting about the 1 in 16 mothers and that statistic, and he was saying even those men were victims. Yes, those people lost their wives, but the women died. The women literally died. So the primary victim of patriarchy is a woman. And we need to get that. The goal is autonomy, and we need to make sure that nothing distracts from that goal. So the work of gender justice is a strong system, strong institutions, and strong leadership from women activists that resist male change to that change, you get, to the gender justice. I beg to stop here. Thank you very much.
Daniela Mushikazi. I'm going to read a quote, and I'm going to just replace one word from that quote to summarize what Daniela has talked about. What Daniela has delivered in very tough times. Men get out of our way. Men get out of women's ways, and we are not in an oppression Olympics. We are just talking about the truth. Look at the statistics, go and look at them. There is no Olympics going on here, it's just a reality. And then also the dream that a patriarchy is going to open up the space for you to actually take that center stage is a dream that has told us to stop dreaming. Essentially, it has told us, wake up and start working and engaging differently. And also has said, no one is stopping you from organizing things if you really want. Yeah? Stop coming to women's forums and say, where are the men? What about the men? Go and organize your men to stop perpetrating. You're giving women even more work. Yeah? You have a double shift. You have to go home and prepare and do the double care and do what? Now you're telling them in that organization, also think about men. Yeah? They've left home with work. They've come in the public space. You're giving them more work. Men, let us be a bit serious. And those are not my words. I might appear very passionate about them. So now, on that note, I want to open up the discussion to the plenary. And in opening up this discussion, I want everyone to be represented, because I know we have some students here, we have media here, we have CSOs here, we have policymakers here, and then maybe let me add lecturers. Yes. So that is how it's going to go. I'm going to get something from a student, something from the media, something from the CSOs, something from the policymakers, and something from the lecturers. I would like to request Tracy. I know you've been having some questions online. I would like to, whoever is manning that speech, the microphone is going to get to you, and you're going to read out those questions to us, because I was not able to retrieve them from my chat room. So, a student, which student is burning? I'm going to start with Quizera Ligan. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, there's a mic there that is coming to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, participants in the debate. So, I'm so worried that gender equality and feminist movements are becoming two competing chambers. At first, I thought we are bringing our voices to make it one so that we can achieve a certain goal. If it's a war like how I've seen it, do we need to go in a war when we have tied the opponent's hands? If it's not a war, if it's negotiating, are you going to sit on the table and negotiate alone when the other party is not represented? I would say, if we are to achieve equality and gender justice, one, you are talking about lawmakers or institutional reforms. Who are currently lawmakers? You've seen so many bills brought in parliament. Just because they are assembled by women, the majority in parliament are men. They will not support it and will not go through. So what we need, engage men, tell them the beauty of gender equality, they support it and achieve. If you are praying against them, they are not going to support you. Secondly, you're all saying men are perpetrators of gender inequality. Everyone is saying men are perpetrators. If you don't tell someone why, you're slapping me, will they know that they are even hurting you? For us, okay, it's my time. If you want to speak, they will give you a microphone. The society has trained men that you have to behave in a certain way. So in order to bring change, let us engage men. Let us let them know that what you're doing is actually not right. Otherwise, we can do the certain way and things move on. And my third point, as I leave the podium, I want you to know that much as you think men are advantaged by the social norms, they are more disadvantaged. You don't know how it feels. You don't know the pressures that men here go through by being the heads of the family. You don't know the pressures that men go through by being responsible for. So we have to engage men.
It is his turn to speak.
It's my time to talk.
Yes.
Let us not be rumor mongers. Let us speak in a gentle way. We need to engage men just because in a certain way, at a certain point, they are also marginalized by the norms and cultural expectations. So, as perpetrators, bring them. As people who are maybe responsible to be taught how to behave. Because we know socialization. And if we don't socialize men, you're who you are because you were socialized. So if we don't want to socialize men on gender equality, how do you expect them to change? And if you don't engage them in making policies that favor women, who are going to make policies for you? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Does someone have a quick word to sort of counter what he has said? That's the person. I'm going to pick one more student before I go to the media. So let me see where to go. Yes, with specs. Yes. I picked the one with specs. Yes. Can you be very slow? I mean, can you not make speeches? 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
1 minute, yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Christine Masika. I'm a colleague of Nawes Sharifa. Now, a question that I'll pose to you. You said we don't understand what men go through as leaders of families. Are you aware of the statistics now that most homes are now being manned by women? Do you know what they're going through as well? And then you also mentioned that a woman doesn't speak up if they are being hurt by a man because she has not informed. Should you first inflict pain and then she should first respond to the pain for you to recognize that you're actually hurting her? These are normal things. You see, there are things that you not understand as a man. I cannot say that we should actually put a man at the front in issues where he cannot even understand the bare minimum of what a woman goes through. How many girl children drop out of school when they're pregnant and the boys go to continue their life? They go on, they study, and the girl remains behind. All these things still happen to women. And you think we should actually put men at the forefront? No. I wouldn't also want that. No.
Okay. I promise I'm going to come to the media, but I'm going to take 2 more students. Give the mic to Nsobia Hannington. Yes. Nsobia is next. You need the microphone for.
Well, good afternoon, comrades.
Good afternoon.
By name, I'm Nsobia Hannington, the Girls School of Women and Gender Studies and the Guild Prime Minister. Well, I'm not saying this because I'm defending men or because I'm disregarding the efforts of women to achieve gender equality and equity. Yes? But there is no way anybody in this world will ever deceive you that you can achieve something without involving the power holder. Yes? Like it or not, men should be on board to achieve gender equality. 2, the only opinions and suggestions I would expect from our maybe debaters was, I liked her submission because she talked about it, but still she didn't sink into it to give us the details about it. That is, looking at the agents of socialization, hold away as far as nurturing, bring these people up is concerned, to expose this gender knowledge to these people. Because if these agents are not focused on to it in growing from churches, the schools these people are going to attend, this information is given to these people, there is no way we can deceive ourselves at an older age. When people have already consumed a lot of information in their heads, they are to actually take up this so-called what? Gender equality. But like it or not, these men have to be put on board to achieve this. Because it's them who have to push fellow men to agree and take up these gendered ideas in order to achieve gender equality and equity in our society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm taking one last student, the one in specs behind there, because the hand has been up. Yes, before I move on to the media. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nyabonye Samantha, a student of gender. I would like to talk about what she said.
Yes.
And first of all, like in most sub-Saharan African countries, we take an example of Uganda in Lira district. Most women have assumed subordinated positions to their male counterparts because of patriarchy. Why? Patriarchy is a principle, one, that believes in men being in control of the productive role or rights of women in and out of the home. The sexuality, the mobility in different institutions of education, the legal institution. So now you're saying it shouldn't be a war, but we have tried advocating, we have tried the legal route, we have tried writing articles and papers. What more do you want? So now we want to make it a war because that's what you decided it to be. We have spoken, we have written, but when you air out our issues, you don't want to listen. You're saying issues of what it means to be the head of a family in a home, but you're not telling us the issues. You want first project the anger onto the women in the home before we tell you our issues. Then when we tell you our issues, it's not hard. the marriage law since 1953, as she said, still not passed. Why? Because you believe it's not a major issue. But women are suffering and you don't want to listen to their opinions. So it has to be a war.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on a little bit from the students and go to media. Is there any representative from the media who would like to say something? Anyone from the media who would love to say something about the topic of today? Media, as you're thinking about someone to say, I would like to get someone from CSO, anyone from civil society, media, right? Civil society. Yes, someone from civil, and please tell us your name. I'm sorry I'm introducing this late, but quickly tell us your name and then give us your submission. And which organization you're coming from, since it's a CSO representative, yes.
Thank you. Jacqueline Hopo Mbabazi is my name. Concern for the Girl Child is where I work. I do manage programs there. And just like the name of my CSO is, Concern for the Girl Child. Allow me say, it's unfortunate I'm beginning from the absurd bit, that it's absurd for us to stand here and say we don't need men. I advocate for the girl child, but trust me, if we are to win in this case, someone told us it's not an Olympic, and I pray that we maintain that we are not fighting a battle. Allow me say, we need each other equally. Allow me say that just like the social stratifications are both religiously and culturally, we all know, for instance, when it comes to the normal family management, we have a head and all of us will concur. Now, if we maintain debates of we must remain the same, then we are going to have two heads, for instance, in that home, and that gives us a beast. I have not seen anyone with two heads. So the moment we come to terms with such things, I also want to remind us of scripture that talks about we are all made in the same image, the image of God. I wish we would advocate for equality along such lines, such corridors of treat me as though I am human, not because you are superseding over me. Treat me because I have equal rights as you. I am made in God's image just like you are. But also, we tell our girls that for a stable and steady society, we need the head and the other to submit equally. But the one who is submitting must be taught that we are the same. We are all made in God's image. And that is the equality that the women want. We don't want to be suppressed. But also we tell the girls, we don't want two heads. Be empowered, but don't turn the whole nature into the beast that I talked about a while ago. That aside, one of the presenters said men are not coming up to do anything.
Jacqueline,
about.
Can you not? Yes.
But allow me say I belong to Church of Uganda, where we have men involved in advancing gender equality through the different platforms of Fathers Union, Marriage Fellowship. I know of NGOs, consortia that have come up to advance gender equality. I know of Men Engage. We partner with Men Engage. And the things we do, we engage men to focus on fatherhood campaigns, sexual reproductive health. We do workshops on HIV. We partner with Family Life Network, whose aim is also to stabilize this thing that is spilling over, women emancipation, it started as a good movement, but it has begun to spill over by introducing the beast that I talked about. I wish, as I summarize, that we would go back to the normal being of remembering that both of us are made in God's image, and also remembering that we have a head in this whole setting. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to request the students, we're about to put an end to this discussion. Can we reduce on the moving out and in? It's very distracting. We're about to come to the end of our discussion. So if we could hold on for a few more minutes to keep us here. And so is that a CSO? Where are you from?
I'm a student.
Not yet a student. I wanted to get something from anyone who is a policymaker or a counselor. Do we have any of those represented here? Yeah, a policymaker or counselor. Yes. Quickly move the mic there. And I want one of the maybe lecturers to get ready also as the policymaker gives their submission. But I would like to also request that the movement reduces because it is really distracting to the rest of us. Yes.
Thank you very much, moderator.
Yes.
Nice to meet you all.
Yes.
I'm Nansa Sisumin Damba, a woman councillor, LC3, that is Nabingo in Chenga Town Council. For me, about men engaging in gender equality, I'm here to challenge my fellow women. As the previous election in Uganda, that was 2021, we had a woman who contested as a president. But we all know that women, we are 52% of the voters in Uganda. But our fellow got 0.32%. Before we call upon men to join us, let us support ourselves. Because as we all know that the direct seats, women come out and contest. But the voters, the most voters are women. But they vote for men. Let us not be used by men to vote for them and to give them power. Because that power, we are the one who have it. But we give it back to what? To men. And again, we come back here and we cry that men sit on us. So I'm calling upon all women to support ourselves so that those men will follow us as we are supporting ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any policymaker, any other policymaker in the room? Any other policymaker in the room? Are you a policymaker? Yes, there's a policymaker here in the room. Thank you so much for that rich addition. Only policymakers, not students. Because students, you have to allow others a chance to engage in this thing. They are in the field. You could learn something from them. Yes. Maybe you could tell us your name.
Thank you so very much. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak here. And by names of Nakauka Nuliat, I'm a district councillor to Wakiso District Council. I greet you all. The role of men in promoting gender justice. The fact is, we cannot exclude men. They have to be part of us. But as they have been using us for all along, we also have to be with them when we are
using
the opposite. Because for a long period of time, women have been used in society, religiously. For example, in my religion, they tell us you cannot see God when you are not submissive to your husband. They say, "Janayo muchala eruwansi wa bigere bya mwami we." But in this era, we see women who are taking the whole responsibility.
Yes.
If you can really try and visit a school, when children are being sent to go back home, even these ones who are here at the university, you will find 75% contacting their mothers, not their fathers. Now the head thing that men are the head is no longer with value, because they have disvalued them being head, because they're no longer responsible. They no longer take their full responsibility. And even in the beginning, they were not taking responsibility. But they were using us as women. You could find a woman digging. After digging, sewing and doing everything, at the end of it all, the father or the head of the house is entitled to the maize and everything which has been harvested in the home, because he is the head of the family. But in the evening, he joins his fellow men in the center to celebrate how he has a hard-working woman in the house, but the hard-working woman in the house does not have the all entitlement about the harvesting.
Yes.
So it is a high time women we understand our power. It is high time women we understand that we have been powerful even before. And they have discovered, they were bright enough to discover that we are powerful than them. Then they raised us when we are inferior. Women does not do this. A girl does not talk like this. A girl does not do this. Raising us up when they are killing who we are inside us. So let's discover who we are. Know that we are powerful. We can even win wars as it is in the Bible. They had failed. If it wasn't a woman who fight Samson, and even here in Uganda, Uganda and Bunyolo, they had failed already, but it was a woman who fought Chiwan Chibuka. So we have to discover ourselves. We are powerful.
Yes.
Let's embrace our power and live forward. Thank you so much.
Okay. Do you see why she's a politician? Do we have any lecturer who wants to say something? Yes? Okay. Lecturers don't want to say now. I'm going to take a few students. The one at the back with specs. There's a lecturer who wants to say something. Can we move the microphone to our visiting lecturer? Is that impassioned? Yes.
I think
right,
if I
thank
start
you.
close to Daphne, she might protect me in case I cause any trouble. But thank you for the debate. It's very intense, and you've raised very important points. In the interest of time, I'll quickly say that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that all humans are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. So on this point, what I'm trying to say with my contribution is I think we somehow need to take a pragmatic approach to see how we can build bridges rather than collapse them. Because even if the window in a house doesn't work, you don't pull down the whole house, basically. You try and correct what is not working. And those of you who are scholars of sociology, a German sociologist called Anna Arendt, in 1951, she wrote a book that was called Origins of Totalitarianism. And in the book, she writes a quote that says, we are not born equal. We become equal as members of a group on the strength of the decisions we make to guarantee ourselves equal and mutual rights. In this case, it means that it's we as a society to decide what type of nation, family, or community we want to build. And on this framework, especially on an issue like gender, taking very hard stance might not work very well, because we know in the works of scholars like Max Weber, who wrote The Theory of Power, you can't take power directly without using certain means from the one who has the power. And there are two ways to go about it. Either you use force if you have the means, or you use diplomacy, which might appeal to the people who have power by convincing them on the value of your ideas. So I don't mean that for instance, I don't remember her name, the last speaker, Daniela, who said that men should make way so that now women can take over. Of course, I understand where they come from, because men have not managed to properly sort of challenge the structures which would make women get included in the society. So we have to take the risk that even as we as men, we come into this movement, we have to be careful that we are not centering our own power so that we become saviors of the movement. In that case, I think I will leave the floor so that other people can speak, but thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much. I almost like where this argument is going, because we are now looking for approaches, because there are things we are not disputing in this discussion today. We are not disputing the fact that there is patriarchy and there is power, and there are people who hold this power, right? Even the opposers and the proposers are saying that. I think where we are disagreeing is, how do we go about sort of sharing that power? Do we take it by force? Do we negotiate? Do we use diplomacy? How do we go about sharing that power? Because I think we all want to get somewhere which is a society which is gender equal, right? Okay, so who wants to? I'm going to take two more, and then I'm going to close the discussion.
Excuse me, Doctor, the comments as well. People participating.
Who is going to read those comments? Yes, thank you. Tracy, please read for us the comments online, because we had forgotten about our online community.
Okay, let me move closer.
Yes. You're not going to see them from here because they are cut off from above there. That is why I wanted.
Someone is handling it.
You see, it's cut off. Oh, yes.
Okay, we have one from Elizabeth Atuhere. She says, engaging men solely as tools to advance women's rights without recognizing their own struggles, vulnerabilities, and identities is not only unsuitable, unsustainable, but also unjust. True gender justice recognizes that patriarchy harms everyone, and men are not a homogeneous or universally privileged group. Then we have Maneno Stella. We need to consider individual experiences while advancing gender justice. Elizabeth, who is a perfect feminist. Professor Josephine Ahikire says, accountability is a key word. This is power and hence a political issue. Maneno Stella again. I like that point. Men should stop disrupting women from their goals. Belinda says, side-eyeing the current speaker. I don't know who, but...
Which speaker was that one? Yes. Okay.
It must have been Daniela. Then Stella, how long does it take for us to achieve gender justice through men's engagement as an approach? Destiny says, which cultural norms are against men? Really? I know. Belinda, it was, this is a long one. It was Toni Morrison who said the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdom, so you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. this quote can be applied to this discussion with regard to misogyny or patriarchy. Elizabeth, that is why male engagement is important. Changing society norms is not just like an event, it's a process.
Someone said, interesting, the beast, in response to, I think it was
Yeah.
Jacqueline. Yes, two heads of a family, yes.
Then Elizabeth again, much of the discourse around male engagement is gender justice, appears to be shaped by global feminist and development frameworks. The point of reflection is, to what extent do such discourses resonate or clash with traditional African constructisms of masculinity, particularly within Uganda's diverse cultural context? Are we decolonizing or reinforcing the colonial gaze in how we approach men and masculinity? This was my question on theory and practice.
Very rich nuances. And I think with that, I want you to allow me to move the discussion towards some kind of trying to wrap up, because we have limited time here and we can spend the whole night discussing this topic. And so, as you know, we had a few speakers that we had invited, and you've heard from what the audience has said. I want to to go around, and each of you is going to give me just 1 minute, and I'm going to really be strict on this 1 minute. And you're going to say it where you're seated on how we can wrap up more of approaches. What's the way forward? Where are we looking? Is this a male engagement? What is it? What do we do with it? Do we toss it in the dustbin, or do we carry it on? And I'm going to start with Dr. Amon, who was the keynote speaker. 1 minute. Yes. The microphone, can it move to Dr. Amon Mwinya? Yes.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on these exciting learnings. We pick all of them as learnings. We want to emphasize one thing, that society is so complex. It is so interwoven that we can speak of giving space to each other now. That, to speak of women in that corner and men in the other. I think the strategy needs to be, how do we put accountable mechanisms in place to counter any form of reproducing male domination where it should, where the strategy is looking at equality. That's where we need to move. Let's hold men and women accountable to achieving gender equality. Where we have said that Tumwesije is a champion of gender equality today, and tomorrow he seems to deviate, we have the right to say what you are doing is not resonating with the equality that we agreed the other day. That way, we have the potential to counter the backlash that comes in the strategies that we craft. Number two, every strategy that challenges patriarchy, that creates any milestone towards gender equality, generates an equivalent form of resistance. We need to learn that power produces resistance. And therefore, we don't need to constitute the movement and its achievement as if we have done nothing. We have achieved. We have registered. We don't need to retreat and celebrate. We need to consciously strategize and say, this achievement we have registered in girls' education, what kind of resistance is it likely to generate in a patriarchal system? And our programming goes to that level. Okay. So we need to be conscious that achievements in gender equity generate resistance. So our programming needs to be awake to that kind of resistance.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Who sets up these accountability mechanisms, right? What's the composition? Where do the men come in the picture? Where do the women come in the picture? Even that is a question in gender we have to always think about as we think about these accountability mechanisms, in order not to reproduce the same power systems that we are talking about. I want to move quickly to Jordan Tumwesije. 1 minute. How do we move this forward? This animal called male engagement or the role of men? Yes.
Thank you. I think, first of all, it's important for us as men to reflect, to have our own spaces to reflect on how we can do better. That's why I was advocating and arguing for men to decenter masculinity from femininity by moving away from defining masculinity as anti-femininity. When we define for ourselves what masculinity should look like away from the confines of the problem that we're talking about this afternoon, that is the patriarchy, it will enable us to have honest conversations, first as men,
yes,
before we can sit on the table to negotiate with women on how we can further advance gender justice. So for me, I think, again, the approach involves all of us coming together, but of course, men recognizing their role in entrenching the patriarchy, but also making commitments to do better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan. Let's hear from Sharifa. 1 minute, please. Yes.
Still as a human rights student, I think I'll stick to the laws and the policies that we've been talking about. One of the people that asked questions, that was a student, mentioned that the parliament being occupied, but most of them being men. The thing is, if they wanted to, they would.
Yes.
Having a marriage bill being shelved for years, having a marriage and divorce bill being shelved for years, and it's till last year that we have a marriage bill, really, for all the years we've been here, and seeing these inequalities happening, seeing the violence happening. You don't need to tell someone you're beating me for them to understand that they're actually beating you. If they wanted to be part of the move, they would actually have joined us early enough. So I believe we can be able to drive this as we have been driving it from the very beginning, coming up with our own theories, activities. We can challenge the gender norms. We can be able to get these cases and be able to protect ourselves and fight for ourselves.
Yes.
I still stand on saying that the role of men is just more symbolic than actually the actual cause we are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Jimmy. Just 1 minute. Jimmy.
Well, I think it has been close to 3 hours of learning, relearning, and unlearning.
Yes.
It is very important that the things that we have got from here,
yes,
we need to use it outside there. Specifically, I want us to put this in young boys and girls, that as much as we see a lot of inequalities, young people must learn that these things can be changed, so that boys, the young ones, do not fall in love with absolute power, that they can use it against women to oppress and make them subordinates. So it's therefore very much important that we need to continue with such engagements, even outside a debate like this, so that people know what roles they can play as we try to fight gender injustice in Uganda. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Daniela.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you so much for organizing this debate.
Yes.
I think such conversations are important, and like Dr. Mwini has said, we've learned, there's a lot of learning points, and because society is very complex, every time a conversation like this is had, everybody moves a little closer, a little further away from their absolute bias, and then a little closer towards a middle ground and a position. And whereas my points really were just to say that women need to focus on their goal of autonomy, which I still maintain, I also know that women cannot live outside of community with men, that we cannot live in one corner and then the other corner. But I think women need to realize, like I think the counselor said over there, I think women need to realize that this is the fight for their lives, and if nobody else is going to take it seriously, we're happy if men are supporters, but if they're not supporters, I think then we need to carry this burden on our heads, and because it's most important to us.
Thank you very much, Daniela, and also for your very impassioned, one can tell you're a debater. Yes. And so, what the purpose of us coming to this discussion today is exactly what has happened today. We wanted to sit here, a group of diverse people, to talk about this issue, and we wanted all the opinions as diverse as they have been. The one thing we can all agree on, if we don't have everyone on the table, it is very difficult to move something. No matter where you're coming from, we have to have everyone on the table. Whether you agree with them, whether you disagree with them, whether you want to throw stones at them, whether you want to talk to them, whether you don't want to talk to them. And the other thing we all have to agree on is that the area of gender and the gender space is imbued with norms, so deeply embedded. From the time we were born, you're being told how to be, how to move, how to behave. So these norms will take time. It's why you see when they talk about gender norms and behavior change, these are things that take 10, 20, 30 years. And no matter how much we don't want to acknowledge that, it's a reality. And so we have to sit and discuss and agree and disagree and learn and unlearn and pack and unpack until we get to a solution. And the solution of this is to have everyone being treated as a human being, for no one to be dehumanized. We are going to negotiate this power, which is a reality. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose, but let's not leave that table. I think that is where I would want to end the discussion. Thank you all for participating, and I want you to clap for yourselves on that note. I want to thank the students. I want to thank the media houses. The media houses, you never say anything. It's because you want to pick out some things. We want you to be involved as you're picking out things, so that you were there. We put you in front of the camera as well. But we want to thank the media, which is here with us today, the counselors who participated, the lecturers who put off time and were here. And I've not yet finished. Two things are remaining. We have something for you. Please don't go without picking something for you, because we prepared it for you. And it's a lot, by the way. So please don't leave it. Go and get something. But before we finish, this event was made possible by Women's Pro Bono Initiative. So I would be remiss in not calling someone from Women's Pro Bono Initiative to give the closing remarks for this event. So someone from Women's Pro Bono Initiative, please come and close us off. And also tell the students if we can have internship opportunities. Yes, because they are in my inbox about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daphne. We are so happy for you enabling this. Our dear debaters, thank you for the worthy fight. It has been a great one. I don't know if there is anyone who has lost, or it's not about losing. We appreciate for making time. We truly appreciate Dr. Amon. It's a conversation that we are carrying on. I'm happy that you made time, and we shall continue having this. One, male engagement. As we close this, ladies and gentlemen, male engagement is about encouraging, one, men to seek out themselves services that has been deemed to be feminine. Men should go to the hospitals. Men should go out and seek treatment. Men should not sit there struggling with mental health issues, and they think it's feminine for you to go out and seek help. So that's, first of all, that's what it is, that you don't sit in a bubble and you're dying and you think you cannot go out there. Then the other thing is, men should stand where there are violations and not keep quiet. So we should teach them to stand out. If you're moving and you see boda men harassing and speaking funny words, and a girl is passing, you cannot just pass on and laugh. You need to stand up and say, no, you cannot do this. Why? Because most men listen to men when they speak. It's important. Another thing is, we are mothers, we are sisters. Teach your sons to respect women's rights. Especially, so if you are for women's rights, if you really believe in this, like, take it further. to your sons. You cannot sit as a mother if your son is somewhere violating another woman's right because she can't give birth, and you're saying, let's get another woman, and we should not be found doing that. You get, so it's at all levels. Is it about men versus women? No, it's not about that. It's not about that. So we come in this space from a very scientific research place that there is a need. There is a need. When men are prisoners of circumstances, prisoners of society and social engineering, and some of them really, really, really need help out there. We find them in prison crying like babies after doing whatever they have done. We find them dying off because they didn't know that there is something called cancer, prostate cancer. You see them struggling when you're going back to, you see in taxis, people saying, man, you got sadya, man, you got sadya. They are taking a lot of things. They feel a duty to perform in bed. They have been told that a man should last for 10 hours. So they are going there to exercise their manhood, doing all these things. We need to help them, liberate them from all these standards. That it's okay to say sisobola. And then instead of going out and seeking herbs, you go to a medical facility, go see a specialist. You understand? So it's a big conversation that we shall continue. So we are going to continue this conversation on X Space on Wednesday, and we are going to ask these very good points that you had, Daniel, that we take them to the space, because there are still many men. You've seen the deadbeat fathers and people who don't want to take care of their children. We need to tell them that a man should take care of their child, but it's not a responsibility of only, it's everyone's responsibility. You understand? So thank you so much. It was a very great discussion. We shall be coming back with many more discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, so, like I said earlier, I was at this university, and when I wanted an internship, I wrote an application. So I will encourage you to do the same. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think you've had that one very clearly. Yes, write an application and go and see. Closed mouths don't get fed. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who took off time to participate in this very interesting discussion. And the reason why we made it into a debate format, we really wanted to get those, rich nuances from different sides. So I want to thank everyone. Once again, I want to thank the students for making the time. I know students are running from one lecture to another, so having them here is something that we don't take for granted. We want to thank the counselors and policy makers. We want to thank Women's Pro Bono Initiative. We want to thank the lecturers. We want to thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Amon Mwine, and our proponents, Sharifa, Daniela, Jordan, and Jimmy. Thank you very much. And we hope to carry this on. Have a lovely afternoon or evening, and please, go to that table and do what you need to do there. Thank you, and have a lovely evening.